Present secret societies, or if they are what the White House and the U.S. Congress could.
All right, so watching this documentary, and I use that term incredibly loosely, about, I don't know, nonsense. I think it's called Eye of the Phoenix. It's one of those Masonic, Illuminati, conspiracy type documentaries. I'm going to check it out so you don't have to, because if you ever watch something like this on your streaming services, your recommendations will then have paranoid schizophrenia. So we don't want that. See this? See this? Are you living your best life if you're not eating peanut butter out of a jar with a spoon and an NWO shirt? Because I'm not sure you are.
Currently tell us symbols of divine providence, of stability, and the patriotism of America. What the founding fathers intended as they designed and ultimately approved of the Great Seal remains mostly a mystery.
Well, there's still a lot of mysteries around a lot of things that happened in this country. Not in our history books.
There can be no doubt that those things hidden in the shadows of the last 2 centuries are not easily brought to light. But when one comes into the modern era, into the age of photography, film, and the advanced practices of mass media, it becomes a bit easier to document world events and the intentions of those who have helped to shape them. In the late 19th century, Harvard professor Charles Eliot Norton referred to the Great Seal as a dull emblem of the Masonic fraternity. This idea was furthered.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people that think there's a huge Masonic conspiracy for everything, and it's a club, is all, and you're not part of it. So you might want to get over that. I don't know what they do there, but I've known a few Masons. They don't seem like bad people. So what's the deal here? In fact, if you want to look at it, and at the time of the country's founding, there would be definite reasons to have a secret group that discussed stuff like deism and radical politics. One that was like literally a secret society, so the king couldn't find you and kill you. So, yeah, decidedly not threatened by Masons. I'm sorry. And of course, there were a lot of them involved in the founding of the country. We've had anti-Masonic beliefs for quite some time. Anybody that has a basic familiarity with American history knows of, anti-Masonic Party and the Know Nothing and some other groups that really were heavy into attacking the Masons. But yeah, if you believe that the Masons control everything and you're super paranoid, that's just mental illness being projected onto the world. That's all it is. So, you've got your subjective paranoia that came from childhood trauma and bad choices. And instead of going into therapy or, taking care of your mind, you're just letting it decay into nonsense. And that's where a lot of this comes from, And this documentary, I think, comes from a pretty conservative Christian perspective. I don't know if these guys are Birch Society members or something, but they have a whole string of documentaries really along these same lines.
By a cult philosopher, Manly P. Hall, in the early part of the 20th century. Hall not only believed that the Great Seal.
All right, so Manly P. Hall, I think he's a Canadian mystic, but again, I've known a lot of people who just claim, oh, he's so evil, just a Canadian mystic. Like, literally, you read his books, and it's the most non-threatening thing ever. He's talking about, interpretations of ancient Egypt, that have no basis in anything, really. They're just his opinions. And other than conspiracy theorists, I don't know anybody who talks about that guy. You know.
It was Masonic, but that it was created through the collective consciousness of the occult societies and represented the secret destiny that they had in mind for America.
I'd say that he saw the secret destiny of America as the beginning of a world democracy, and that this was a kind of an experiment in democracy that had been envisioned for thousands of years before. So he saw this much like Francis Bacon envisioned what he called the New Atlantis.
In 1926, Hall began publishing a newspaper called The All-Seeing Eye, dedicated to his occult views of philosophy. It was during Hall's era that the All-Seeing Eye of the Great Seal would be taken out of obscurity and placed on the back of the dollar bill by President Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1935. This might all be seen as just a coincidence, if not for the fact that FDR seemed to be familiar with Hall's teachings on the occult.
So occult teachings only matter if you have some weird, non-scientific, non-rational view of the world. If you are grounded in scientific rationality, then somebody being into the occult just means they have some weird belief that's a little different from some Christian's weird belief in, magical Jewish carpenters and sky fairies and whatever, because to me, it's exactly equivalent.
Today, Hall's legacy is carried on at the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles, California, a society that Hall founded in 1934, just 1 year before the Great Seal found its way onto the back of the dollar bill. The current president of Hall's Society is Dr. Obadiah Harris, shown here in what is called the Wisdom Library at PRS. According to their website, the library is made up of writings that deal with divination, tarot cards, Kabbalah, alchemy, astrology, metaphysics, Buddhism, theosophy, and secret society.
So again, none of that's a problem. Just different weird beliefs about stuff. That's only like a buzzword if you're an idiot and you just can't understand that there are billions of people in the world that don't agree with you. In fact, since there are 16,000 different denominations of Christianity in the world, I would also say that, the 2 billion or so Christians don't agree with each other. So, metaphysics is a branch of philosophy. What's the problem? Okay. So, I guess knowing things is the real problem here.
Yes.
And wisdom literature is about relationships, not only to each other, but to nature, to the universe. That's what this library is. This library is a library about the wisdom that is in nature and in relationships, and how it is that you can tap into that wisdom in any culture. It all overlaps. And Mr. Hall felt like that was really the future of the human race.
So that's just a religious approach called syncretism. It's pretty common. Not every society has an exclusionary monotheistic religion that thinks it's the answer to everything. That is common to Islam and Christianity, though. But if you look at periods of time like Hellenism or the Roman Empire, you do have a lot of a huge plurality of beliefs that kind of mix together. Because in the end, they're basically speculating about things that aren't real, so it doesn't really matter.
Like Hall, Dr. Harris believes in the destiny of America. Even more interesting is that Dr. Harris's own writing on the subject was unofficially acknowledged by an important figure in FDR's White House.
I wrote a little book one time, one of my first books.
And we have had presidents that were into weird shit. I mean, Lincoln was into spiritualism. You know, just because you're the president doesn't mean you don't have a relationship to spirituality. Just because you're spiritual doesn't mean that you don't have weird approaches to that. So, you know, again, it's you have enough presidents, and you're going to get some people in there that aren't exactly doctrinaire in their approach. And we know the founding fathers were all deists, almost to a man, meaning they believed in a prime mover, creator, philosopher God, basically, that you can find represented in the writings of Thomas Paine. Meaning that they were not churchgoers, they did not believe in a personal God, they didn't really believe in Jesus. So, I mean, I hate to say that, but that's, you know, for you people that think this is a Christian nation and it's founded on Judeo-Christian principles, that's a new term. It doesn't have really any meaning, you know, before like 1980, but hey, let's go ahead and use it. So, yeah, I mean, this was not founded as a particularly religious country. I also heard initially on this, this guy's referenced democracy. Well, this country wasn't founded as a democracy, as Republicans are fond of saying, of course, but they're correct. It was not founded as a democracy. Anyone that's spent any time reading the Federalist Papers knows that that word is basically pejorative in those papers. They were attempting to avoid what they would characterize as mob rule, which later was, of course, inaugurated by Jackson. Jackson extended the franchise to all males, all white males, and throughout our history we have become more democratic, of course. But that has nothing to do with the founding of the country. So the founding of the country was not founded to be that. We made a decision as a society later to change that. In the same way that stare decisis is not in the Constitution, but we have decided that it is a good idea to have the Supreme Court basically judge the veracity of laws. And that's served us well in extending a lot of civil rights to people. So I don't necessarily think that just because the founders weren't a fan of it. I mean, of course I don't. I'm not an originalist. I don't believe that that's even a sensible concept to even follow, considering the founding fathers change their own ideological positions throughout their lives in response to changing environments. So why should we be worried about what they thought when they founded the country? It's nonsensical. But if you wanted to do that, yeah, you can go on Project Gutenberg. You can read all of the founding fathers' collected papers, thousands of words. That's fine. Doesn't have any bearing on a lot of our particular questions, though.
Was the reawakening of the Americas. So we usually lose sight of that, the whole problem. And I got a little 1-cent postcard from Eleanor Roosevelt thanking me for that. I carried that around for years because I thought that was a great compliment.
But even more important was the familiarity that President Franklin Roosevelt had with the arcane literature in Manly Hall's so-called Wisdom Library, a collection of occult books that Hall had gathered from all over the world.
And Mr. Roosevelt himself, back in 1942, after the Pearl Harbor invasion, sent some of his people here to microfiche the works in this library because he looked upon it as a national treasure. He wanted to preserve it. And I was surprised that when I first heard that, just how much he seemed to know about such a treasure of wisdom that is contained here.
FDR's interest in the arcane
that's a rooster chair now.
was further reflected in the relationship he had with his Secretary of Agriculture,
That chair's Crimea, huh?
Wallace.
Yeah.
And so it was then in 1935 when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the President of the United States, and Henry Wallace was the Secretary of Agriculture. Now, Henry Wallace was deeply involved in the occult.
Wallace's interest in mysticism was well known in circles around Washington, D.C., but it was something that would eventually damage his career in American politics. H.L. Mencken dubbed Wallace the Swami, while it was also said of him that he was the only cabinet member who dabbled in the occult and who could cast a horoscope. In spite of all this, FDR ardently defended.
So Wallace was very left wing, right? So keep in mind that that's part of the attack here. He was to the left of Roosevelt, so I'm sure that some of this has a basis in his politics. May not represent the man himself. I don't know enough about his biography to tell you.
Him. According to one account, when one of FDR's close advisors worried that many people considered Wallace a mystic, Roosevelt snapped, "He's not a mystic. He's a philosopher. He's got ideas. He thinks right. He'll help people think." But the question was, who was helping Wallace think? This question has been deemed critical because it was Henry Wallace who suggested to FDR that the Great Seal be placed on the back of the dollar bill. But why?
Well, it has a lot to do. Let's go back to really important individuals here. His name is Nicholas Roerich.
This cat's a dog. That's what you are.
You're Duke. Go for it, best. Go for it. Nicholas Roerich was a very advanced spiritual soul.
He's rubbing his
with
face
considerable vision.
on my freshly shaved face.
Nicholas Roerich.
And actually, guys, I don't know if you know this, but you can't catch coronavirus from your razor. I mean, I found that out today. I wasn't sure.
Who was deeply involved in theosophy and the teachings of Madame H.P. Blavatsky. He is famous for his travels into Tibet and the Far East.
Alright, Madame Blavatsky is like the biggest fucking pile of horse shit you'll ever fucking read. And if you need to have an endorsement, Hitler was supposedly a fan. So, it's literally just fucking trash. So, they were mentioning it because she's supposed to be this big occult fucking figure, but she's just an idiot. I mean, come on now. Oh, yeah, I had to answer a DM there. I don't know about you guys, but my DMs have age right now. Straight up.
He's in search of the legendary kingdom of Shambhala. But what was his relationship to FDR's Secretary of Agriculture?
I believe that Nicholas Roerich was a spiritual teacher. Not a supreme spiritual teacher, but was a teacher of Henry Asgard Wallace.
Roerich was considered not only a teacher, but a spiritual mentor and guru to Henry Wallace. It's believed that Wallace recommended the Great Seal to FDR because of the mystical influence Roerich held over him.
The dollar bill was approved.
Oh, yeah, here we go with the Illuminati dollar bill shit again.
The truncated pyramid with the all-seeing eye on the top of it. Because of Nicholas Roerich.
In the book, Tournament of Shadows, the authors document much of the activities and influence of Roerich during this period. They write that Roerich's influence was suspected in the adornment of the $1 bill, with a verso of the Great Seal, showing a pyramid crowned by an all-seeing eye. The story of Wallace's role with FDR is told by the State Department in an official history called The Eagle and the Shield, a history of the Great Seal of the United States.
Henry Wallace, while sitting in the State Department, found a booklet on the Great Seal of the United States.
Wallace recollects that day in letters he wrote in 1951 and in 1955. He says, turning to page 53, I noted the colored reproduction of the reverse side of the seal. The Latin phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum impressed me as meaning the New Deal of the ages.
In terms of the dollar, if there's a code about the New World Order, I think that they jumped a few decades
from the New Deal, because the Novus Ordo Seclorum can be translated to the New Deal in English as easily and readily as to the New Order or the New World Order.
Initially, Wallace envisioned the Great Seal appearing on a coin. He took the idea to President Roosevelt.
So when Henry Wallace saw this booklet and saw this pyramid in the Iron Triangle, he was a Freemason. He was a member of a secret society. Immediately he said, whoa, what a symbol to have and not use. Let's use this. So it was he that went to the president, FDR, and FDR, being a Freemason, looked at those symbols and said, hey, yes, wow, this is the New Order of the Ages. What's the New Deal? He actually thought to a degree that the Novus Ordo Seclorum was the New Deal.
Wallace wrote that Roosevelt, as he looked at the colored reproduction of the seal, was first struck with the all-seeing eye, a Masonic representation of the great architect of the universe. Next, he was impressed with the idea that the foundation for the new order of the ages had been laid in 1776, but that it would be completed only under the eye of the great architect. Roosevelt, like myself, was a 32nd degree Mason. He suggested that the seal be put on the dollar bill rather than a coin, and took the matter up with the Secretary of the Treasury. The Secretary of the Treasury at the time was Henry Morgenthau.
And he talked to Henry Morgenthau, who was the Secretary of the Treasury, and got him convinced that we should put this esoteric emblem from the back of the Great Seal of the United States on the back of the dollar bill. This really symbolized the fact that now the esoteric influence dominated the American government.
So the problem with a lot of this secret society horseshit is, alright, so you could ban them tomorrow. Doesn't change the economic system of the country or the political makeup, or literally it's pointless, right? So whatever's decided at, let's say like a Bilderberg conference has already been talked about by the officials that go there, right? Or if you have a like a Skull and Bones or Scroll and Key club, I mean, obviously the people going to those schools are going to network anyway, and it's going to have the same effect. So that's pointless to worry about. Stuff like the Trilateral Commission, of course you're going to have Europeans, Japanese, and Americans talking about economic issues. There's a system of economic cooperation and alliances that extends throughout all three countries, regardless of where that exists. So it's really unsophisticated to believe in a lot of this stuff, and it's unsophisticated, and it's silly to think that that's going to matter, or you could ban like the Bohemian Grove, which people are worried about. You're still going to have people that are on top of society meet somewhere and talk about things. They still do it. It's not like that's the only time your Hollywood directors and your corporate heads and your heads of politics all get together and have conversations. They always have conversations. What do you think lobbying is? And that's dealt with, of course. Lobbying is enabled by the fact that you allow corporations to be considered individuals under law. So, or at least, in regards to political finance. So again, no solutions to any issues, just blah, 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 theory, paranoia, buy a movie, watch it, be stupid.
And Morgenthau, the Secretary of Treasury, wrote extensively about this point. He said there's some strange cabal, some mystical order behind the scenes, calling shots on the artwork that appears now on our dollar bills. He had to approve it, and he later had found out that this was all Henry Wallace's. It was all based on Henry Wallace's relationship to Nicholas Roerich. Nicholas Roerich.
Just remember, if you ever spend any time watching this crap or reading books about this crap, you're spending time on that, you can be spending on something else. So with that said, fuck this movie. Don't fucking watch it. Don't put it on your Amazon. Don't believe anything that's said here. They're fucking morons. And read a book about a real subject. So, good luck. Godspeed.